PowerPoint slide.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tonight, I just want to start by giving an overview of the Montana Natural Heritage Program and give you guys some introduction to the information that we manage, and hopefully expose you a little bit more to our resources that I think you might enjoy to explore the natural world of Montana. So our program is part of the Montana State Library, and we've been in existence since 1985. And the program was established centered around centralizing information for environmental review, permitting, and planning processes. So it came out of the coal debates in the 1970s and different agencies having different information to inform environmental review processes. And at the same time, the Nature Conservancy was establishing heritage programs in all 50 states and Canadian provinces. When it was initiated, the Nature Conservancy ran the program for a number of years as a contract from the State Library. And then in 2006, the University of Montana took over that contract. So we have a close working relationship with University of Montana and a number of programs there, the Spatial Analysis Lab and the O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West. But we are, a number of us are directly employed by the library these days. In terms of the information that we manage, we now have around 3.1 million observations of plant and animal species in our databases. And again, that's focusing on that primary focus of getting information and making it available for environmental review processes. We also manage information on surveys that have been performed, whether that is a vegetation plot, or whether that is a bird point count, or whether that's a small mammal trapping survey. And at this point, we have information in our databases on 5,300 animal species and around 5,900 botanical species. In the botanical realm, we have really good coverage for most botanical groups with the exception of macrofungi. And I'm very confident that we will be moving forward on the macrofungi, the mushrooms here for the most part, and getting those well represented to the extent of knowledge at this point. In the next year or so, we are going to be working with Tim Wheeler and Kathy Cripps on that very shortly to get the macrofungi represented. The other thing that we do as a program to inform environmental review, permitting, and planning processes is we assign a conservation status rank to species. So, and that is on this scale on this little blue diagram with the yellow arrow on it. We rank species both globally, those G1 there, and state, all the S's. And the ones mean a species is either critically imperiled at the global, the G scale, or the state, the S scale. And then all the way to the other end of the spectrum, G5, S5, secure at the global or state scale, and then combinations of those ranks. And we also manage information on biological communities. One of the key data products that we manage is this species of concern occurrence layer, where we're really focused on species in the state that have been listed as Montana species of concern. And that is one of the main products that we put out in those environmental review for the environmental reviews. And that's a polygonal layer of various plant and animal observations that are worthy of conservation consideration. Because we don't have surveys everywhere, we also create predicted habitat suitability models to fill in the gaps. So when, let's say a cell tower is proposed, it's literally a kind of a postage stamp on the landscape. It's very unlikely that there would ever have been a survey right at the location of a cell tower. These models can help fill in information as to what species might occur there and whether surveys are needed on that small plot of ground or not. And then finally, we manage information on the land cover, statewide land cover layer, and also wetland and riparian mapping data that is at a standard that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service manages, the National Wetland Inventory Program. So Our wetland inventory program, then the map on that upper right, we have it up to modern standards in all of those green mapped quads there. And then the dark blue ones we're mapping right now, and the light blue ones are scheduled to be mapped. We will get into this a little bit later in the talk, but I have a few slides that I'm going to just show you now, and then I'm going to jump into the website. And I just wanted to say that our data philosophy for centralizing data is there's no one right way. We accept data from a variety of professional biologists, really keen naturalists, citizen scientists. So anybody can help centralize data and report data. And we are going to go through a few of those tools tonight with you. And we'll just, we can work with you as to what works best with you. And we think that iNaturalist is a great way for general public to submit data. We also make our own smartphone applications. If there's any really serious people on the Zoom meeting tonight, we can work with you on that in terms of helping you report your data. We also have a simple web entry tool that I will very briefly show you later. And then Scott Mintzmore will be talking more about this, but I wanted to just right off the top here introduce these topics, and that is there's a program called Seek by iNaturalist, and the website location is there at the bottom, and you can download that from the App Store or Google Play. But I found this to be very interesting for informing me on various invertebrates that I see in the field and some plant species. It doesn't always work, but it's a very I think it's a very useful tool that I would encourage people to give it a try. And essentially what you're doing is you're holding your phone camera up to again, it could be an animal or a plant. You could take a still photo of it, or you can have just the camera live through the app, and it will identify either to species, to genus, to family, whatever its best shot at the identification is. So it can be a handy tool that you might want to try. And then finally, Scott will be going more into this, but iNaturalist. So again, iNaturalist is one of the things that we're recommending ways to report data to us, especially if you do not know what the identification of the species is. You can submit data this way, and then a community of folks can help identify those data submissions. And you can use iNaturalist. There's the address at the top. You can download it from Apple or Android, App Store or Google Play. You can explore other observations that people have submitted. You can track your observations. You can subscribe to taxa that you want to see if someone has reported observations of a certain taxa. You can follow certain people who are reporting a lot of records in iNaturalist. And then finally, one thing we're encouraging, if you do this, we would really appreciate it if you would join this project at the bottom, Montana Natural Heritage Observations project. And that allows precise locations of data to flow through to us once the community within iNaturalist has identified that record or confirmed that record to a species. And then if you already are an iNaturalist member, because there may be folks on the call who are tonight, then there is a way to batch assign all of your records to the Montana Natural Heritage Observations Project, and that's outlined in these steps. And I think that this will be recorded, so I'm not going to take the time to go through these steps, but you can come back and look at that when the recording goes out. So, and finally, again, since this recording will be going out, I just want to make sure that folks are aware that they can reach out to me at this email or my work phone number if they've got follow-up questions on any of the information resources we're going over tonight. So with that, I want to switch over and go to our website, and hopefully you guys are seeing that. Give me a yell if you're not. Tonight, what I want to do in our next half hour or so here is go through some of our key websites that I think might be useful to the general public who's interested in the natural history of Montana. And I'm going to go through our field guide, our species snapshot, and the Montana, if I have time, the Montana Natural Heritage Map Viewer. But we'll do the field guide and the snapshot first. So the field guide, as I was saying before, is a great way to look at the around 12,000 species records that we have in our species that we're managing information on in our databases. And we have different field guides. We have animal guide, a plant guide, a fungi guide. Again, that will be the one that we are, I think Tim Wheeler is going to be very interested in helping us finish that, and as well as Kathy Cripps. Our ecological systems or community guide. And then just recently in the last couple of years, we've added an invasive and pest species guide. So I'm going to spend most of the time on plants, but I do want to just open up this invasive and pest species guide because I think that's a useful resource. We are providing, that is subsequently broken down into aquatic invasive species, noxious weeds, forest pests, agricultural pests, biocontrol species, and then all other non-native species. Going into our plant guide, and this is how all of these guides work. If you go into the plant guide, then you can drill down taxonomically. So if we were interested in dicots and Asteraceae, you can continue to just drill down. At every step of the field guide, in the upper right here, you will notice there's a PDF symbol and a view images symbol. So the PDF symbol will allow you to download a standalone PDF of that portion of the field guide. So you might not want to do it at the very top of the field guide because you're going to get 5,000 plus species. But as you drill down, you may want to go ahead and download a significant section of the guide. Once you're down to the family level, you will see individual photos pop up and range maps if we have those in place that can help you identify things. And also this view images tool. If you click on that, you will see that then we're tiling all of the images of those species at that level of the guide so that hopefully you can maybe a little more quickly find the species that you're maybe trying to identify. It's in the Asteraceae, it's yellow, something like that, and then you can scroll through photos and click on those individual images to link to the full account on that species. Let me go back up to the top here, and I probably won't do it for Asteraceae because it's such a big group, but let me just click into one account here, and we'll go through what's in an individual account. In each individual account, we have a photo or image of the individual species. We have what the agencies, just to the right of the photo, what the agencies are assigning in terms of a rank for that species. And then we have a variety of links here, whether it's to NatureServe, which is our parent body of all the heritage programs in the US and Canada. We centralize data to them, and they work with us on assigning those global conservation status ranks and helping us manage taxonomy. The NRCS plants profile, and then some Google links for images and web pages that will preload for this species. The search will be run on that species. So we really look at the field guide as trying to be a gateway of information for you in understanding the flora and fauna of Montana. Right underneath the photo is a state rank reason that goes through how we've assigned the conservation status rank to the species. Below that is a general description, phenology, what characters are diagnostic, a range polygon, and not all, just stop here for just a second, say not all species in the state have range polygons built for them, but that is something that we are working away on as we develop predicted habitat suitability models for species. And then below that, we've got our the way we share data with the general public, where we have a relative density map and a recency map, and gives you the timeline for that and the density of that down below in that little legend below the maps. And then we summarize data on what time of year the observations have been reported, what years they've been reported, and what the elevational profile of those observations is. We give a little bit of information on the habitat that those species occupy, the ecology of those species, reproductive characteristics. And then if you're really interested, we've got literature that we've either cited or additional references at the bottom there. So, so for every species, again, that's available for many species in our guide. Let's go back up to the dicots and maybe go into, well, actually, maybe I'll skip back up actually a little bit higher to Planty. And then say conifers. I wanted to give you an example of downloading a guide where we wouldn't get bogged down in the download. But let's say you were interested in a guide for all of the conifers in the state. You could again click this little PDF symbol, and that will download a guide. It's cranking away there. As soon as it's done, I'll open it up. And then you'll have a PDF. You could load this on your tablet for the field. I do this a lot and load it on my tablet or smartphone to help me when I'm in the field, mostly on invertebrates. But then there'll be a one-pager on each of the species in that group. So if you want to look at things taxonomically, this is a great way to learn more and have a resource with you if you're not online. Every one of those accounts will have a range map. If we've built one for the species, they'll always have the observation map, and then the timeline of the months when the data has been submitted. So definitely encourage you to make use of that. We'll go back up to the top of the guide and just say you could also search for an individual species in the search bar at the upper right. And if you don't, I just typed in Penstemon lemhi. I didn't finish Insis, so if you get a portion of the name, that's good enough to get you to the account. This account is got photos, a few more photos than the last one we were on. So I just want to make sure that you know that we're trying to include photos that represent habitat and flower parts and enough to help out anybody with identification. I also wanted to note in this search at the top here, if we go to the advanced search, there is a way to start filtering out different groups. So we could say, I want vascular plants that are Montana species of concern that are also ranked S1, and search for that. And there we go. And then you can compare those results. So at the bottom of that search tool is a way for you to create your own custom guides. So before we were downloading guides for entire taxonomic groups, again, within wherever we're at within that taxonomic hierarchy, and you see that PDF symbol, you can download. But there is a way that you can go ahead and create your own guide if you want to use it out in the field. And let's say you have to type in the scientific names. So there I've got a couple. Create the PDF, success. Again, this would be if you wanted something useful for you in the field that you can take with you, and there's your two species. Now, if I had in there, if I had, let's just take a couple, I spelled it wrong, for instance. it's going to say error, and then it will provide a search option there for you. And then I can say, oh, you can look through all the silene and say, we're getting there. There it is, silene Spalding eye. That's what I wanted, and go back and clean that up. So again, that's just a tool that you can use to help yourself find, have information in your back pocket on particular species when you're out in an area. So related to the field guide, we'll go back out to our home page, and I want to take you through our species snapshot site. Our species snapshot site, we will eventually make part of the field guide, but it really is just an extension of the field guide. And it's a way to spatially filter information on the species of the state. And so you can see numbers popping up here for essentially almost all the species that we manage information for in the state. But we have filters up here at the top on this species snapshot. And I'm going to just filter for a variety of spatial filters here. I just want to show you how it works, and then I'll come back to this. But let's say we want to go down to Beaverhead County, and we're going to be doing some hikes in Beaverhead County, and we want to see vascular plants of Beaverhead County. Maybe we're only interested in Montana species of concern in Beaverhead County. Let's submit that. So there's 104 species that are vascular plants in Beaverhead County that are species of concern. Now let's get some preliminary information on those species. So here's that list of species that met those criteria and the number of observations in Beaverhead County. So we've got 8 observations of Cusick's horsemint. Those species of concern occurrences that we use in environmental review processes, there's 9 of those. We have predicted habitat suitability models. I don't want to go into too much detail on models for this audience, but I would say if there is anybody who's interested in the audience tonight about models in terms of looking for species, we are finding that these models help us fill in gaps in documented range of species, and the models can be informative on that front. So if you are interested, I would encourage you to click on that view model link, and you can download a write-up of the model for that species, and it'll include some map output that might that will show you where the species is predicted to have suitable habitat. And it'll also include some observation data on the top of that that allows you to identify areas where you might be able to add new records to our database for that species. There's also a link here to the field guide. It's this little bird symbol, and then a link over to the Map Viewer website. And I don't think I'm going to spend too much time on the Map Viewer website, but let's do that for this species as an example. So that will take us over to our Map Viewer website, and it will open up. Things are running a little slow tonight. Close down a few pages here, that might help us. Well, probably a better way to show you is just to come back to it later, but that way you can see a general distribution of the species later. So again, you can go down this list and just explore what species are in vascular plants are in Beaverhead County. And I also want to point out that at that point, you can download an Excel file of that list. So that will just provide all that information. Get it opened up here for you. That will provide two tabs. It'll provide one that shows you where the information was from, and then two, it'll give you a table of all of the species that came out of that list. And again, for some of you that may be of interest to have all that densely packed information, for others not, no worries if it's not. One other download option is to download that custom field guide. So we can do that. Again, there's 104 species here. If you want a guide that's specific to Beaverhead County on vascular plant species of concern, it's that quick to generate that list, and then we'll download it here in a sec. While that's downloading, I also want to point out that you can print out this report, and so keep that in mind. And while that continues to download, I'm going to go ahead and just make the point that under that upper left spatial search, county was just one option there. We do provide lists. These are documented lists of species in each of these cases. We've intersected all of that data that I showed you in that early slide with each of these polygon types. So whether it's county, a buffer around all the towns in Montana, maybe if you're used to using old topo maps, you are interested in all the species on a particular quad map that have been documented, a township, continental divide. Let's say you want to create quickly a guide of all of the plants that are documented east or west of the continental divide. It's that easy to do. Just say west of the divide, and then I want all vascular plants, or again, you might be interested in bryophytes or lichens as well, but, and then download the PDF. So mountain range. This is actually the one that I probably use the most as I'm going on backpacking trips. I love to just say, oh, well, I'm gonna go to the Little Snowy Mountains, and I want to have a guide, you know, in my pocket on my phone. I can download a PDF of all of the species in the documented in the Little Snowy Mountains to help guide me in my observations there. Other things in that spatial filter list: conservation districts, national parks, forest boundary, some BLM and other agency areas, watersheds, important bird areas. If you folks are, any of you are birders and are also working on important bird areas, documenting you can see what plants are documented on those. Important plant areas, if you're visiting an important plant area, that's a great way, and tribal boundaries. So in each of those cases, you can generate custom field guides. And again, let's just do that example of my example of I want to go to the Little Snowy Mountains and I want all vascular plants, and I really don't care what status they are. I want a full list. Submit that. I think I'm still going on. Oh, this is, yep, vascular. Yep, okay. Not a lot. But again, there's the number of observations particular to that area. So I just want to point out that this tool can be useful for, let's say you want to add, help people add and fill in the information on knowledge of distribution of species in our state. This is a great tool for figuring out what species are documented where, and maybe potentially adding new species to that list. I didn't get back to opening up that guide that I downloaded earlier. So again, here was the first download that I did. All Montana vascular plants found in Beaverhead County that are species of concern. So again, that will give you a one-pager on each of those. Again, that basic information, the photo, the range map, the observation summary, what time of year they were reported, general description, phenology. One other thing I want to report on before I go on is the different status types here, because one thing I want to note The Heritage Program about 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago now, I guess it is, started managing information on invasive and pest species. So I think this is a really useful way of tracking what weeds are showing up in your area. So you can go ahead and say, I want to download, or I want a list of the noxious weeds and regulated weeds for, let's go back to county, whatever county you live in, Fergus County, submit that. And there's the noxious weed list of documented noxious weeds in that county with the number of records that we have in our database. So, and again, at that point, after you've created that list, you can go over to individual field guide accounts for each of the species on that list. And one thing I wanted to point out as part of that, you may or may not have noticed that, but I want to make this clear. I was on one browser tab when I had my species snapshot open, and then you can click on that field guide link, and that will open up a new tab. So your tab, you still have a browser window open for the master list, and now you have a tab for the individual species that you've clicked on as you're kind of learning more about it. I would say that just to make this point very clear, the guides that you download on the PDFs, we are limiting the information that we put on those downloads, and the accounts online have much more information in them. Andrew Pitt very recently has put a lot of time into writing these invasive species accounts, and I think she's just done a fabulous job with it. That will actually be our new standard for our native species, but we had some funds to do this for these non-natives. So, and I also would say that we are really getting there in terms of having the vast majority of invasive species data in our database. And that project also allowed us to enter a lot of native species data. So our native species database has really benefited from that. I've got about 8 minutes left. And so I'm going to spend just a portion of that. I'm going to go back to our map viewer site here and just point out, and actually let me go back to our home page. I want to make sure I'm making it clear to you guys how to get to this. These 3 sites that I'm going through tonight are all right here at the top center of our main homepage, mtnhp.org. The map viewer is the third of those links. And that's definitely running slow tonight. Not sure what's going on. If it's running too slow, we'll just call it good here. I want to go to our generalized observation task and just point out that this is a good way of exploring information on individual species. There are a variety of tools at the top and menus on the left, and then the map screen in the middle, and then tabular data on the bottom. So as an example of how to use this, we're going to go and just filter for a vascular plant species here, and we'll just pick something here at random, alpine bitterroot. And there are the observation records showing up that you saw in the field guide, but now in the map viewer application, there are ways to find out information on those individual observations. So the way to do that is to go up to the top of the map, click on the identify tool, and then come down and click on an individual observation there. And you can kind of see, what the record is. There's also at the bottom, charts and data window, and then observation details. And so what I want to point out is I've got both of those open, and you're seeing all of the data statewide shown by this red box kind of highlighting the whole state. But now I'm going to go ahead and zoom in using one of these tools on the top, this plus symbol. I'm going to zoom in to just Northwest Montana, draw a box around it. And you'll notice that those charts and data change, and so does the observation details, or do the observation details. So then you can see some of the details with those individual records in terms of the dates that they were reported. You can also, if I close that window down a little bit, hit a back button and zoom back out to the full statewide view. Again, if we open that up now, then again, we can see some of the tabular data, at least the dates of reporting for all the records statewide. So I can do that for an individual species. I can also zoom into an area. Let me do this. We'll zoom in again to that northwest corner using that plus symbol. And I can say, well, I want all vascular plants. We're asking it to do a fair amount there. Again, the charts and data at that point is not all that meaningful, but the observation details, that's going to crank away for a little bit. I might zoom in just a little bit more. Saying I've got too much data to show. My point with that was to say that you can get a list of species potentially that way as well if there's not too much data showing. Again, I just want to point that out to you. I think the species snapshot will probably be a little bit more informative for you along those lines. And I think now's a good time for me to turn it over to Scott and let him talk about iNaturalist. And again, hopefully we've got those earlier slides recorded so that people can reference those and they can see the links in those slides for future. Scott, turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, before we start with Scott, we have one question that
Sure.
came in, and Betty wants to know, are the observations used in the field guide from element occurrences, or is it a broader data set?
So the broader data set is our observation data. We manage, again, information on surveys, anywhere a particular protocol has been followed, and then all the species that have been detected with that protocol. And that includes, that makes that broad group of observations. And then some observations will qualify for species of concern occurrences. The species of concern occurrences, one, they have to be a Montana species of concern. We're not going to make a species occurrence for ponderosa pine. And two, typically those species of concern occurrences are only going to be built off of observations that are associated with reproduction of the species. It's a little less relevant for plants, but for animals, the classic example I give is that you might see a bald eagle flying over, and that's an observation, but that doesn't qualify for a species of concern occurrence. A bald eagle on a nest, that reproductive event is going to qualify for that species of concern occurrence. So broader, the observations are broader, and then only some of those become species of concern occurrences.
And just a quick follow on. So are you harvesting data from the iNaturalist Montana Natural Heritage Observation Project?
We are. Thank you for saying that, Tara. So to connect up what I'm talking about and what Scott's going to talk about and how you can contribute, and why iNaturalist I think is such a great tool for contributing. There is a classification within iNaturalist called research grade observations. And that might be that you have submitted your record and either you know it or you think you know it or don't know it. And then one or two, I believe 3 people have to concur, yourself and 2 other people, before it reaches research grade. We will filter out the research grade observations, and then we will verify them again ourselves because they're going to have to be submitted with a photo. and we will bring those into our database. So that's the connection and why we're encouraging you potentially to use iNaturalist. Again, there may be a few people on the call that are expert botanists or really keen botanists, but just as a hobby. If you are interested in helping us out in another way, we can pass on our Survey 123 smartphone application that you could use. But in general, iNaturalist is a tool that we want to encourage everybody to use. And it's also a great tool for submitting records of things that you don't know what it is. You see the coolest bug or the coolest flower that you don't know what it is, but you're thinking, wow, I've got to submit this to somebody. Take a photo, get it submitted, and then that community in iNaturalist can identify it.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. And yeah, we're eager to hear more about it from Scott now.
All right. Oops. All right. Is that showing up then for everyone?
Yes, it is.
All right. Let me see if I can get something out of my way though on the screen. Okay. So yeah, I just started using iNaturalist last year around June. It kept coming up in some different questions as I interacted with some folks with the Heritage Program. And if you've done any, say, Google searches online for, say, a particular plant species, anymore, it seems like some of the first results that will come up in the search results are iNaturalist results, whether it's something related to an observation or something on their community forum that's being discussed. So that kind of led me to look into it more and finally join it last June. So iNaturalist actually started in 2008 and actually is a master's project for 3 students at UC Berkeley. After that, it became a joint initiative and it's run by the California Academy of Sciences and the National Geographic Society. So in terms of plants, the taxonomy and nomenclature that's used for it is maintained, and what's used is the Royal Botanic Garden Kews Plants of the World Online. So that's what they're using in terms of a name database for vascular plants. For mosses, if folks are interested in that, we're lucky the main resource that they use is the Flora of North America, so very pertinent then in our part of the world. And you have to keep in mind that iNaturalist is used worldwide, so it's not something that is just for the US or North America. So I do want to cover kind of these aspects right here that you see on the right, basically how to access it, some of the general features of iNaturalist, how you add observations via a smartphone app or the website. Bryce had mentioned kind of the batch kind of loading of data, which I'm not going to talk about. How you add observations to the Montana Natural Heritage Program Observation Project, how to go about identifications on iNaturalist, and how to use and where the online help and video tutorials are at. So in terms of the smartphone apps, it is available for Android on the Google Play Store and then for Apple on the App Store. And that's what I'm familiar with. I'm an iPhone user. So you can download iNaturalist, and there's the Seek app that Bryce also mentioned that can help with identifications of plants and animals. And the first thing that you'll need to do once you download the iNaturalist app is create a profile with a username, password, and you can fill in a profile with some basic information about yourself if you like to share with other users, and a profile pic if you like. So looking at the iNaturalist app, I'm going to kind of go through the basic screen functions that are available that you see down here. This is under the Explore menu option, and you can look at a particular area, and it'll default to where you're currently located. And this will be all the observations that are currently in iNaturalist. And they're color coded according to taxonomic groups, with green being the plants. Red and blue, I don't remember, different animal groups. I don't remember which is which off the top of my head. And then if you go up here, you can actually then get a list of the observations of the area that you're zoomed in on. Moving on, if you go to the activity button, you'll see information related to all of the observations that you have submitted. And as other users add identifications or comments, those will pop up here on your iPhone app. Here then is the observe button. And when you click on that, you get this screen that comes up, and we'll talk about adding observations from taking a photo immediately or ones that are already on your phone. And the next menu option is this little icon that says me, and this will display all the observations that you've collected in chronological order as you've actually uploaded them to iNaturalist. And then this more menu option, there's actually two things here, guides and projects. Guides, which I don't have listed here. If there's any guides that people have uploaded, other users, that pertain to geographic areas or taxonomic groups that'll help potentially with identification, those will be listed here. And then the projects, which we're going to focus on here a little bit later, but the one of interest for us is this Montana Natural Heritage Observations Project. And if you were to click on that, it'll bring up this screen that shows information related to that project, including how many observations are currently listed there with over 5,000, the number of species that are represented, how many different observers have submitted those, and the number of identifiers or people who have identified those taxa. So in terms of adding an observation with your smartphone, again, when you click on that observe button in the middle of the screen, this screen will come up, and you have two options. You can either take a picture with your camera right then and there, and then it'll automatically upload those photos here, or you can search photos that you may have just taken that are on your phone, or ones that are slightly older that you now want to upload to iNaturalist. And again, those will show up right here. And on the smartphone app, it'll allow you to add 4 photos to an observation. On the website, I think you can add more than that, but it limits you here. So I did this one of a draba right near my house. And you can choose which one you want as the default photo. The next thing that you'll see is it'll ask you, what did you see? And you can type in a name, or it will actually use its what has been observed nearby, and or just from recognition of what's in the photograph, it'll try to deduce what it is that you're seeing. In this case, it's saying it's something in the Brassicaceae or mustard family, which was correct. And then here were its top suggestions, which actually in this case weren't correct, since this is in the genus Draba. So if you wanted to, if you knew what it was, you could type the name in here, and a drop-down list would come up. Or in this case, you might just want to say, well, yep, it does look like it's in the family Brassicaceae, so I'll just click on that and call that my identification for right now. One thing you do want to make sure is when you're using the app is you do want to have your geolocation ability within your settings on your smartphone turned on, so that it'll not only timestamp your photo, but also provide the exact location of where you were at when you took the photograph. The geo-privacy setting will default to open if you don't choose anything, and that means the exact location will be available to all users. You can actually check whether it was a captive or cultivated, in this case, plant, if you thought it was a cultivated plant. And then the project that you may want to attach it to. And in this case, again, the Montana Natural Heritage Observation Database is what we would choose. Switching over to the website, this is kind of what the general website looks like. I just want to highlight a few of the different menu options and things that you can do on it. In this case, I had searched for the plant kingdom, and I limited the geographic search to the state of Montana. And you can see what came up here, and that there's over 55,000 observations in iNaturalist for plants within the state of Montana, representing over 2,000 species. Over 1,700 people have worked on identifying those particular species, and all those observations were submitted by over 4,000 different observers. Going back up here to some of the menu options, I'll talk about this one here on the next screen. The community one has like a forum and some other information, but if you're particularly interested in dialogue and discussions that are happening within the iNaturalist community, you can look here. The identify tool we'll look at here in a moment. And same thing with more. Upload is how you will upload pictures and turn them into observations. And these other ones here relate to your profile. Don't know why my cursor isn't going up there. There it is. If a particular iNaturalist user may send you a message, that'll show up here. This one will show you if you have any updates that you haven't looked at in terms of either your own observations or other observations that you've looked at and submitted an identification. If someone else has also now submitted an update to that, you'll get a notification there in that particular box. If you're interested in then what observations you have submitted, this is the screen you can look at. In this case, here's the observations that I've submitted into iNaturalist. It'll tell you how many, the number of species. You could click on this to see the actual species that you've submitted on, how many different people have identified the species that you've submitted. And then this will show you chronologically all the different observations that you've submitted into iNaturalist. In terms of adding observations into iNaturalist on the website, it's similar, but there are more capabilities on the website. So what you're going to do is you're going to go and click on this upload tool. And when you do, you'll get a screen that looks like this that won't have any of the photos loaded yet, but it will have a little icon that you can click on to start loading photos from your directory structure on your computer on here. So I've already uploaded 4 photos here that you can see. I identified the first one here is Lilium philadelphicum. It did automatically put the timestamp, and it did not fill in a location because this was before I started allowing my camera to geo-reference where I was taking the photos. So in this case, you would have to click on this little icon. It'll bring up a map, and you can actually pinpoint on a map where you took the photo. The other thing to keep in mind, because I see a lot of people don't do this, but you want to make sure to, since these 2 photos are of the same plant, just a different view angle, you want to combine these into one observation. You don't want to submit them as 2 separate observations. And to do that, what you simply do is you'll take this photo and you're going to drag it. Oops, well, let me go back. And you're going to drag it into the first one, and it'll combine those 2 photos into one observation. So you definitely want to make sure you do that part of it. For this other species, Hymenopsis grandiflora, same thing. You're going to drag these 2 photos together. And in this case, the timestamp, I already had it geolocated because I had the setting on my phone last year when I took this photograph, so it knows the exact location where I took it. And then the other thing to look for down here, generally you want to make the location public for most things that you're taking. And this is where you'll click on the project, and you can then make sure that you either search for or make sure it's linked to the Montana Natural Heritage Program project. And then once these are all ready to go, simply hit the submit button, and that'll be uploaded to iNaturalist. Here, looking at the identify tool quickly. So in this case, I simply limit it to Montana. I clicked on this filter here and it brings up a dialog box, and I clicked on the little icon that says, well, I want to look at just plants. And it brought up this, and what it will list is chronologically the most recent ones that have been submitted to iNaturalist. So in this case, I had picked, well, I want to look at what the trillium is. And when you click on that, it'll bring up this dialog. It'll show you the photo. And if there's more than one photo, it'll show up down here. I highly recommend you look at the location, make sure it kind of agrees. I've seen ones where the location doesn't seem to make sense with the photo that was submitted. And so you can zoom in here on this map to find detail. You can also change it to a satellite imagery versus the map. You can see the other details. And then if there's an ID here that either say the original photographer had put or someone else did, if you think it's correct, you can simply hit this agree button and agree with their determination. Or if you don't, or if you want to say add a comment with your determination, you can click on this add ID button and you can add your own identification along with a comment or two if you like. With that, just want to make sure you're aware of under this more menu, the help and video tutorials. They've done a great job documenting what they've done. So if you have any questions, this does a good job of answering it under different topics. And then the video tutorials, these are great as well. They cover kind of the basics and they're really short. Most of them are literally just 1 or 2 minutes in length. They show you the basics of how to do it. So I highly recommend watching some of these videos as well. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Hey, Scott, I wanted to address one of the questions people were saying, maybe it's hard to view on an iPhone screen. How much of the time are you entering on your phone versus using your desktop at home?
You know, it kind of varies. So typically if I'm, entering, or if I'm out in the field and collecting new photographs or actually submitting an observation on the fly, then I'm doing it all on my smartphone. But a lot of us have old images, whether they're from a digital camera, they may have been slides or photos that you've digitized. Lots of people now are starting to upload those kind of photos into iNaturalist. So it's kind of a mixed bag depending on exactly what you're doing. But I'd say, both work quite well.
And there was one other question that I wanted to generally address, and maybe you can add to this, Scott, and that is someone had asked a question about can people see precise information that I'm submitting to the Heritage Program, or can they see data on the Heritage Program websites that is precise? And the answer to that is no. We try to show that in a very generalized way so that we're not putting any species under threat of collection. And iNaturalist, I know, works with the individual heritage programs in all the states so that if a species is a species of concern, they will not share precise locations of that species on their through their web app. But they can share the precise locations with the heritage programs so that it can be used for good if you join like our Heritage Observation Project. So if you join someone's project, they can see the precise data. Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so in terms of iNaturalist, what they do as well is, by default, the records are going to be open or public. But if for some reason you don't think the specific location should be available for everyone, you can choose to obscure it. And what they do is it then automatically gets shown as a randomized location within it's a 0.2 by 0.2 degrees latitude, longitude location, which equates to basically a 22 by 22 square kilometer area. So you could do that. And if you still have it marked as part of something that'll go into the Montana Natural Heritage Program observation project, I think my understanding is you'd still be able to get the exact location. The Heritage Program would, even if you choose to obscure it.
Thank you. If there are other questions, you can either type them into the chat or raise your hand, and I can call on you to unmute.
There was one question there that I just answered in the chat, but I'll just answer it verbally. And that is, if you've got a bunch of photos on your phone, you can then submit them in iNaturalist. You don't have to have iNaturalist open. You could have just been, taking those from way back when. Or you can have iNaturalist open and gather the picture at the time and submit it. You can do both of those. The key thing that Scott showed you there, though, is make sure you're turning on your location abilities with your photos so that it will be location stamped automatically.
Yeah, that definitely makes it easier. Otherwise, you start zooming in from the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and have to navigate to where you were.
Beth Madden also asked a question about talking about the relationship between Seek and iNaturalist. It's the same group. And Seek is sort of its own, can be used as its own standalone, but as you saw there, I think, Scott, it comes up with suggestions for you when you're putting that photo in, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, so they're kind of merged. You can use them separately, but you're kind of going to be using Seek within iNaturalist. I think it's worth playing around with both of them individually, though. It's a great learning tool to hold that camera up. Again, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it's not always right, but can help you narrow down your search.
Christy just made a great point. If you have experience with botany and you know at least some plants, go in and take a look every now and again, and anybody can confirm identifications if you feel confident in that.
Yeah, there's lots of plant observations being submitted every day, particularly now is the spring. And
I think you're on mute, Scott.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, there's lots of observations being submitted into iNaturalist, and here as the spring progresses, you'll see more and more. So yeah, definitely, if you're not currently a user, I highly recommend signing up and start looking at what's being submitted and make some identifications. The worst, that can happen is you're wrong and someone else is going to disagree, and that's fine. That happens all the time.
To me, one of the things that I think is most interesting is to, find a flower that you haven't seen before that is just a gee whiz flower for you, or an insect, and get those submitted and to get an ID back is really rewarding. And I have to say, professionally, it's super valuable to get those types of records, within our database. So.
And Bryce had mentioned just briefly the whole research grade aspect of an identification. And yeah, an observation will reach research grade if two people agree on the ID and there's no conflicting identifications, or if there is a conflicting identification, then more than 2/3 of the people have to agree on what the species is before it'll reach research grade. But one thing I do see happening on there that I would encourage people not to do is, if you submit an identification, or let's say if you submit an observation and you're not sure what it is that you're submitting, what is happening a lot on iNaturalist is someone that does have knowledge will identify it, and then the observer will immediately go back and just hit that agree button and agree with the person that they think is an expert, and it reaches research grade. And there's a number of observations that have reached research grade as a result that are incorrect. So there's a lot of discussions on the iNaturalist forums about that topic, and they encourage people not to use the agree button like it's a like button on Facebook, or so. Yeah, only use the agree button if you're sure you know, pretty sure you know what the identification actually is.
Scott, there's a question there that I think you might be able to address that I don't know the answer to. Connie says, so you use the community dropdown for obtaining input on plant ID?
No. If you have submitted an observation, if I'm following what the question's really talking about, really it's kind of up to the iNaturalist community to kind of just look and potentially submit an identification. You can also then, if you have a plant that, let's say you think you know what the genus is, you can use the comment button within the observation record to actually, you could look to see who may be an expert in that particular genus, and then you can simply add their username into that comment field, submit the comment, they'll get that comment, and they may then potentially look at that record and make an identification for you. So I've had that happen now as a result. So that's one way you can go about it.
And the next question down, Beth Madden asks, seek misidentifies sometimes. Should we delete those? Sometimes we aren't sure, but it gives a species. Just leave it?
I don't know so much about seek, but in iNaturalist, I mean, it's obviously, it's recommended, whatever taxonomic level it's recommending to is going to be wrong at times. It seems to do good with more common species, and also where the photos are of fairly high quality. But yes, it's going to be wrong at sometimes, but there's not necessarily anything wrong with leaving that up there for someone to eventually correct. And you know, that correction may happen almost immediately, or it may be years down the road that someone actually then looks at that observation again and gets around to correcting it. And whoever just said they'll be tagging me, hey, feel free, go ahead. I'll try to get around to identifying them if possible. It's actually been a fun aspect of this whole process, is you get to, as a result, kind of interact with other iNaturalist users from all different levels. I've interacted now with some other, botanists that I haven't interacted with in quite a while that have backgrounds in Montana, but now live out of state. So it's makes it a fun community effort.
Connie added one more comment there that I wanted to kind of address. We had discussed this, Rachel Potter, Tara, Andrew, and I had discussed this previously, that at some point in the future, it might be good to do a whole night on iNaturalist and really delve into it with some examples that people could walk through. So I don't want to commit you, Scott, but I think maybe amongst the group, we just want to say that we know that there's a need to do that.
I think, yeah, that could work out. Could be fun to do.
Yeah, or as Beth just said, have an iNaturalist user along on a field trip would be another great way to introduce people.
That could be something good to look at for, future Native Plant Society field trips is, yep.
So I want to thank you both, Bryce and Scott. That was a really excellent presentation. I learned, even though I've used the field guide a ton, it's actually, I almost constantly have that tab open on my laptop and my tablet. I still learned some things in there that I didn't know. So that was really helpful. And it's got me enthused to get back using iNaturalist a little bit more. I've slacked off on that. Anyhow, thank you everyone who has hung out to the end here.